thinking about like time, like where and when learning happens, we have to be extremely flexible about. We have one student who is taking care of her younger siblings during the day, so it's hard for her to tap into a class. But she's there showing up and wants to learn. So how can we flex and adjust for her to still engage in some relevant learning experiences, and still meet her needs as an older sibling, and support to her family, right? Because you see, time doesn't matter anymore, right? The scope and sequence, well, that's out the window too, because that wasn't really relevant and engaging for our students. So now we've had to really think through, like, what's your story? What are your dreams? What are you passionate about? How can we help support you in that? How can we help you develop some very specific skills? Um, and then what do you want school to look like and be like? What do you want to experience going through this time we got together, as limited as it is, right? So that's our current work right now. I think the most, and staying focused on the most sort of sobering comment we got from one of the public health officials with Denver Public Health here, Dr. Federico. He was talking to the senior leadership team for DPS, union folk, leaders, saying, vaccine or no, we're still going to be dealing with this for 2 years or more. We won't know the full impact on this has had on us, the pandemic he was referring to, probably for another 4 years out, right? So given that, it's easy to sort of look and say, like, okay, let's quit the game. that's a sobering message, right? But I think also this moment is a place where, and just to be grounded and sane and still feel hopeful, you have to still lean in those things that give you joy. You can still have human connection through these screens. And I think that's where I'm finding strength and safety, and trying to also help my team lean into those hopeful and joyful places as well, and as well as the students.
And yeah, and absolutely. And you talked a lot. Well, I wanted to complete the thought when we talked back.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to think it was April, but it was when the pandemic, the tsunami of trouble was very clear, and schools were starting to close, yours included, and you and your IT person, Nick, right?
Yep.
You all were basically dishing up Chromebooks.
Yes.
And trying to get students to show up in these valuable items that the school district previously probably would not let leave the building. All of a sudden, school districts across the country. But on the other hand, these kids
don't forget food insecurity. And food insecurity in food systems.
But just because you were able to suddenly get the technology with new permission to the students didn't mean they were able to be connected. And who knows what's going on at home. So You've been through tremendously challenging situations, or your students have been through tremendously challenging situations. I just wanted to put that in context as a reality check.
And even despite that, and even before COVID, despite some of the challenging situations they find themselves in, despite institutions and systems that continue to not include them and marginalize them, they still show up. That is the beauty and the strength of all of those young people. They show up and they are there. And so they deserve our best. I think the other toll, and I don't to understate this. There's also a toll on us as educators as we try to really show up and be present for our students. We are not in person, so that stress and anxiety around coming in and risking COVID, that hasn't been placed on us as a team. But these are still stressful times, And it's, we talked earlier before, like I talked about, I'm not leaning into toxic positivity, like just smile, grin and bear it and keep moving. We're human. And I think at some point, like what is sustaining and what I'm finding out about our prep community is the love of that community, amongst teachers, amongst students, our parents. That's sustaining us. We're leaning on that right now. And it's hard. It is, because when you're used to, we're a small school, y'all, 74 students, but when you're used to maybe sort of 8 to 10 students in a class, and you've only got maybe one student tapping in on a Tuesday, right? Or that same one student taps in all week and the other 9 don't show up, that can be demoralizing, right? And so what I've really been sort of messaging, modeling for Focus, thinking through, power of one. Show up for that one kid who's coming through, right? How are you showing up for that student? One of our teachers, Daryl, was we did a session with students at the Colorado History Museum. So it's open. You can go in, be socially distanced. They went in late in the afternoon. It was big conference room that could probably hold 70. It was only 5 of them in the room, right, spread out. And I called in. Daryl was there in person with 2 of our partners, Student Voice and Leadership. Daryl leads or facilitates our student leadership course at Prep. But I asked the students, and I showed them, just my prompt was this. There was a video of, I think, 11 and 12-year-old dancers. Darren Wilson is his name. And it was at the Afrobeat World Championship. The video is only a minute long, but it's just dope. So this kid is like showing like expert level footwork, and you hear the drums and the beats and the DJ just switching it up, and he's just moving to it. And so the girls are dancing and getting into it. And so I asked them after that, tell me about a time that you were in your flow. What's something that you think you do better than anybody else? Yasa, one of our students, spoke up and she talked about my art. We have a new art teacher, Erin Storm, and Yaslin has just really taken to digital photography. And Erin has never taught K-12 education before. He has only taught at community college. So having an 11-year-old sitting in front of you, and you're used to like these grown folk, you're a little daunting for him in the beginning.
That can be a huge advantage.
Yes. But what he's finding is, and what Yasin is finding is, they've made a connection through the art. She's found a passion, and the talent that's being nurtured through that relationship, right, with Erin, her teacher. And so that's what I mean by leaning into those hopeful and joyful places, right, spaces right now. There's a whole lot of stuff outside of our control, and as educators, we tend to want to control a lot, right? I have been guilty of that. I am still guilty of that at times as a leader. And I'm recognizing there are some things within my sphere of influence that others are not. But like what's true is how you connect through story, through work, through joy, through passion. That is still possible. And those are the things that I try to focus on, and also really message to my team, like there's your safe space there with the students, and in the work.
So what I hear you saying through my own experience and filters is, it's at the end of the day, at the end of the week, at the end of the year, it's about making personal connection. And the personal and professional come together. And I'm guessing, we haven't talked about Parker Palmer, but I'm guessing Parker Palmer is somebody who's important to you, and Paulo Freire, and the whole idea.
All those folks.
Okay.
Chris Emden, Geneva Gay, I learned this years ago. I was kicking around Eni Pratt Free Library in Baltimore. My official title was Young Adult Program Specialist, right? But basically, um, I was a youth worker, right? And so I remember going to the ALA conference, and Patrick Young. I have no idea if he's retired or not, but he had written this book around youth development and library work, and it was going around helping library systems create youth spaces, right, inside libraries. So like, if you still go to, I think in Tucson main library, right, next to the quiet book room, like the rare book collection, there's soundproof glass up because right next to it is the youth space. And so the kids, I'm dating myself. This is like back in 2000, right? The high school kids at the time wanted a hangout spot in the library. And then they said, well, we kind of want to do prom here. Can we do like a prom after party? So it may not still be up, but the library literally installed a drop down disco ball and sound in the youth space next to the rare book collection room in there. But Patrick's saying always was, no rules without relationship, right? So however you want to phrase that for the 2020 version, relationships over everything, right? Like we can't really engage in any work until we've got some connection between us. There's some trust built up. And a lot that happens through the stories we share, the experiences that we share, the vulnerabilities that we share with one another. Like that's the work. Because our kids come in talking through, yes, do they have traumatic experience in their lives? Yes, but they also come with these dreams and these passions and these hopes, these ideas of who they are and how they want to change the world. And part of our job should be to give voice to that, right? My colleague who was in DPS for years and now down in San Antonio with the KIP network down there, always talked about the word dream brokers. Like that should be our role as educators. Mm-hmm. How we become dream brokers for our students, right? And it that stuck with me because that should be our work. And I know folks are still talking about SATs and the like, but I guess in this moment of COVID, well, that's sort of out the window too, right? How are you going to do that? And what do those test scores really mean anyway? As students are excluded. I promise not to rant on standardized testing, but I'm just going to say, like, I would much rather lean into hopes, dreams, and passions of our students and of our educators than drilling them down to like test prep and a number.
Well, yeah. You turned me on to this idea of dream brokers, and I knew what it meant immediately. I mean, some of us do. I think it's just a great way to think. And well, let's see. There are a couple of directions I want to go, but okay. I'm going to go in this direction right now, and then we'll come back to some other things. We're in a moment where a lot of things were thrown out the window. All of a sudden, they don't matter. SATs, yada yada yada. And
the list.
Yep. We're smart enough to know that's temporary, and the system will be back in full force. And in fact, what I've been reading, in my survey of the landscape out there, I'm sure you're seeing it, is students are falling behind. Students are falling behind, and we're right back to that, math and science and reading gap, and of course, I would think our great concern is that we will return to this rush to remediation, and if that's the right way to put it, and remediation without engagement. Maybe that's a phrase we should think about. But what do you see up ahead, and how are we quote unquote going to cope with this so that students are not put back? Help me out here, Eric. So students are not back.
Oh, I know that they're not. I am. I'm optimistic about this because like part of it is like some of the systems that um, that have been maintained to oppress folk, right? We've now saying that they really don't matter, and they're, and do we really want to dismantle them or not? So it's a choice, right? We can choose to go back and do things as we've always done them, and continue to leave kids behind. This idea of kids are falling behind and need to be remediated is so steeped in deficit thinking. It is so indicative of deficit thinking and how our systems operate on many levels to keep students behind. I am principal of an alternative school, and I see the results of the current system. So we may have a student who is 15 years old, has been in going through ninth and 10th grade, and may come into our school with freshman credits, say, right? Or less than freshman credits, from like 6 credits total. And you need 240 to graduate in the state of Colorado. So the message is, if I say to that young man, that young woman, or them, hey, we've got to catch you up. You're way behind, so we're going to have to catch you up. It's going to take you about 5 additional years for you to graduate, right? That's how ludicrous. Like you may think like, oh, that those are the conversations we have with students, and what it should, and that shouldn't be happening. What it should be is talking to that student about what skills and assets do you bring to the table. What do you want to learn, right? What can we work together and maybe think of a path for success? And what does success look like for you, right? Those conversations don't happen often enough in spaces, and so like as educators, we got in this business for children, right? That's the goal. I think the other part about that is if we can recognize and be very aware of how structural racism is operating within our spaces in large ways and small ways, how it's operating within ourselves, because it operates that way too. Internalized oppression is very real. We've got to make some serious shifts, and that's what I mean. Like that's not just a catchy slogan. I think about that, and think about that comment like Obama made about defund the police being a snap slogan that cost Democratic seats, right? Well, really, that's a false argument. Like you care what you call it. At the end of the day, are you interested in actually doing something that's going to dismantle an oppressive system, and one that is literally killing Black and brown folk, right? So if our children are literally dying and being lost and left behind and being pushed out of schools, are we as educators willing to say and do whatever is possible to dismantle that system and create something new where they can thrive and involve them in that process at the same time?
Which is,
right?
Go ahead. Which is,
no,
yeah, and we're not gonna we're not gonna get on the Obama thing. We've had conversations, or the Bush thing, or the Clinton thing, but we
Trump thing, right? Oh my Lord!
Well, that's a whole, yeah. But I just bit my tongue, and I mean, we're talking about, you and I have been in this business long enough that we've watched 30 years of the same old race to where, and no child left what behind.
Just all the words.
It's all been very similar restructuring. And what you're talking about, it seems to me, I think the meaning in that comment was clear. What you're talking about is that what's been missing in all of this is a really personal relationship to education. And I'm not talking about personalized learning. That's another buzzword with no judgment.
Yes.
We're talking about personal relationship to why, and having a passion about what it is you want to do and learn. And you all, I know this summer you came out of the Institute when your team was there, talking a lot about creating opportunities for students. And we know you've had, technology and personal challenges with students, but do you have any success stories that you could talk about?
Yeah, like they're all over the place. I think it is, I mean, Yoselin and her story is one, but I think I like the fact that that the prep students are pushing back and saying that they want more. Like we can't be in the building, and we know we're doing online learning, but can you all do that better? Can we? Can you make this more relevant for us and using their voice? Like that literally is in our vision statement as a community.
Right.
Like students will use their voice and insight, right? So that's this moment has sort of created an opportunity where they're looking around and saying like, okay, the normal rules don't really apply here. So I want to speak to this, some things I really want to change. I think the other success is just we're connecting with partners right now Pivot Energy is a company that focuses on solar. They're interested in expanding solar energy to families in the 80205. That's near Northside, Park Hill area, for folk who aren't from Denver, right? And so they want to partner with us, one, to think about partnering with our 11, 12 teachers around projects to sort of engage folk in energy sustainability in Black and Brown communities around Denver. They're hoping that some of those students want to maybe take it further and think about pursuing either trade or higher ed in energy and sustainability, and they're willing to put dollars behind that, right, in the form of a scholarship, right? I think I did a thing, right, in the spring. The DPS Foundation put out a challenge around equity and dismantling systems of power and privilege to school leaders to say, we have $1 million fund. I applied for the first round of that and then was invited to apply for the second round. They're going to give out 4 awards, I think, 250 each, I believe, for submissions that come in. So like, we haven't gotten it yet, but like, I'm just saying there are opportunities that are presenting themselves to prep. I got an email this morning from a group, Think Motive, that likes to connect with schools to do murals in community and on schools. And so we're gonna probably try to bring a little joy and beauty and art to the near east side, right? Working with a community partner. And so again, finding ways to really engage our students and immerse them in their communities to have an impact. Like those are the opportunities that excite our kids. Not so much excited about a problem set in math. Now, I'm not knocking math teachers. I'm just saying, and I'm a humanities teacher, so they aren't really jumping on like going through the textbook and reenacting the Civil War, right? So what we call, like, we don't do fake real. We're still trying to figure out what that looks like for us, but how do we really engage students in authentic learning experiences that speak to them, that speak to their lived experiences, that gives them opportunities to apply their skills in very authentic ways. Like that's the work. And that lift is huge in COVID, especially because we can't all be out and about. Like I think right now transmission rate is up to like 12% in the Denver community, right? So there's nothing risk-free, but trying to be creative and think there are ways that can be done safer, whether it's out in community or online.
Right. And we are dealing with a generation that know how to function in social media with any number of different apps, and it's also a question of self-expression, right? And,
right.
And where identity meets self-expression. And I don't know, I would suggest that we've never had a generation that, for better or worse, are better at that. Self-expression and being able to do that through technology.
Yeah, self-expression, technology, but I think also, like, they woke up like that. Like, it is, and I will say this: I'm not to belittle this, but I think we as adults are struggling more at this time than the students are, and it's sort of an indictment on how we view children, particularly children of color. Like, there's some expectations, like we're asking them to navigate in very adult ways in systems that aren't really designed to support them, right? And so, like, they are used to this uncertainty. they are used to not having safe places all the time. There's a lot to be said and go into that, but I'm not advocating for, like, yeah, that's the thing, but I find that as adults, we're struggling more with some of these changes and challenges, where I see the students figuring out, well, I got to hustle now. There's some things I got to take care of, and they're making it work. So yeah, it is. It's a different time and it's a hard time, but, like, I think the shifts are a little bit harder for us than it is for the students right now.
I would suspect you're right, in varying degrees. And that's a great transition to, you're a real believer in exposing students to entrepreneurial thinking. You've made a number of comments. I'm not going to reference any particular one. You made a number of comments about that. And at the end of the day, I think that what we're talking about, it's not explicit through the institutes that we do, but I think it is very much related to entrepreneurial thinking. Mm. And do you want to riff on that a little bit? I mean, where
I think it's, from? I mean, literally, that is one of the 21st century skills the Colorado Department of Education created as part of the rubric. It is literally, that is one of the competencies, entrepreneurial thinking.
It's named as such.
Yes. So, like, just to give you some context, so, like, around 2014, 15, the State Department of Education, CDE, had launched, like, their action plan 7 years out with new graduation guidelines. One is an individual career academic plan. By law, every student must have. That plan should really be very clear with the families, with the student, teachers, counselors, and the like. Here's your plan for graduation, and here's a plan for you post-graduation, right? They then said 21st century skills, 4 buckets: entrepreneurial thinking, professional skills, interpersonal skills, personal skills. Those should be embedded in every class. Students need practice in authentic context to really demonstrate proficiency in these skills. And then the last, they said, not classes you need to take, how many. They said students should have some knowledge sets, right, around the Colorado academic standards and civics in particular, because, we want informed citizens, right? That was 2014, 15. And so we're 7 years later, and not everybody's gotten that memo, right? Like, even now in COVID, people still aren't getting that memo. And so when I think about And there are different groups who are doing graduate profiles, who are doing sort of knowledge, skills, dispositions. I remember when Professor Sizer would teach, he would always, and I took his class, American High School in the 20th Century. Our project literally was to design a high school as college students. And he would always remind us, if that student has spent 14 years in your district or 4 years in your high school, what should they know and be able to do when they walk across that stage? And I want you to think about that intentionally and deeply, and to design your school backward from that profile of that picture, right? That is a much more compelling message to students, because when I present that graduate profile based on those CDE competencies, 21st century skills to our students at prep, in their words, that slaps. It does, because they start looking at it. I created a pretty infographic with it. I didn't come up with the rubric, but they start saying questions like, I had a sixth grader tell me, wait a minute. So like I can study career awareness because I really know like how people pick jobs or careers they want to be in. Like I'm trying to figure that out now, like I want to be, but can I learn about that in school here? Yes, you can, right? Others are saying like, well, wait a minute. I really have trouble communicating with some of my people, like my mom, my friends. Like I can work on like either public speaking or communication skills, like in school. Like I can actually do that and plan something. Well, yes, you can. So I think a lot of it boils down to, are we listening to the children? Right? And if we do, I think it leads us to some very sort of hopeful, equitable spaces. And it leads us an opportunity to depart from your question, a couple questions ago, like, are we going to return back to the inequitable normal that we were living before COVID hit? Or do we want to really think about the lived experience of our students and maybe thinking about a different way about how we do school and purposes of education?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I would even add that I think even for students that are in the most privileged positions, I don't think the way that we've collectively gone about education serves them on a personal level. It tends to drive you. It tends to drive you into slots, and well, we don't want to go there. But
I will say that I taught at Mary Institute Country Day School in Ladue, back home in Missouri. I think it's like $25,000 a year to go there.
Sure.
Now, and I remember being there in much different places. Shout out to MICDS, because that was like middle school heaven.
I was still from there. We had someone from there at one of our institutes. She was really wonderful.
Nice. Okay, so yeah.
And
no, I was saying that like I remember my first year there, and I wanted to apply for a grant to start a garden with my sixth grade class, right? Because we were studying agricultural revolution, ancient history, but you needed a $5,000 matching grant, and so I was just sitting there thinking like, where am I gonna get $5,000 from? And so one of my colleagues was like, go up to the Hill to the development office and do what? Just go talk to them and tell them what you need. They wrote me a $5,000 check that day. Like, so shout out to MICDS. And so like, they went through this after I left, right? But it was just a great place. But they also were asking the same question. Even in a private school that is a predominantly white institution, $25,000 a year to go there, questions around equity, in terms of cost and access for families and students of color to attend. Questions around purposes of schooling, right? And education. And it has really just changed a lot of like who they are and what they're working on, but it just, that environment was right for that. It started with them asking the questions and making some commitments to change and to equity, right? And so that's what we're doing at Prep in fits and starts. And I don't want to leave this out because this is how I identify. This melanin is here, right? It's not going anywhere. I'm a Black man leading a school. And I think the other sort of truth about that is there are moments of cognitive dissonance when folks see me and hear me, and that cognitive dissonance is how I present and identify and walk in this world as a Black man, because there are many ways to be Black and male. There's not one right way to do that or be anything. But I don't fit folks' stereotypes. And so it's this sort of, I find myself having to do multiple messages to multiple audiences. But I just turned 50, so I'm at a point now where I'm just like, I don't really care what folks think about me. I'm going to be me in my authentic self.
It just gets better, Eric.
It does? Okay, that's good to know. I'm gonna rock with that. I'm just good to know, because when I was in my 20s, I thought 50 was just old as hell.
I'm only 40. So, I don't know.
Yes, I know. I'm telling myself I'm 25 now. But no, I think it is our mission and the work and the kids sustain and drive me. And what I'm committed to is to them. I'm committed to our educators and this work. And I think I see possibilities. I don't see a lot of obstacles right now, because I thought there were going to be, I say, well, I want to change up our instructional model. Thought there were going to be some obstacles. I want to move away from standardized assessment. And well, the state sort of removed that obstacle for every school in the state of Colorado. I really want to dismantle systems of power and privilege, and engage in that work, and say the term white supremacy culture without worrying about getting a union phone call or being called fomenting racism, right? And so I just got to stand my ground on some things, have a sort of a very clear vision, and do all this work in love. So that's where I'm at right now. And still very clear about the challenges that we have right now. So like, I don't want to paint this rosy picture, but like there's a lot of love, hope, and joy, and there's also some challenges, but like that's life.
Yeah. And it's become even more on my mind. I mean, we entered this COVID period, or whatever we want to call it. I don't know, what was it, 10 months ago, something like that. Mm-hmm. And we've been kind of navigating it, and schools have been in and they're out, and they're in and they're out. And you and I have been back and forth in touch. I've been following your progress. At some point, schools will be back fully in. And there's a vaccine, and whatever happens, and schools are back in. This is a big question. You don't have to have the answer to it. But
I hope we're not back in as normal, but go ahead. Come on with your question. I got you.
What are your best thoughts on how, because you and I began a conversation last spring that followed on others. How do we avoid going back to normal? Because some of us think normal is really bad.
Oh, normal is bad. And we may have talked about this before, but at one point, I'm going to forget the book, and I think the name is The Little School, or the Little, I can't remember the name of the book. But anyway, in that book, there is the author basically bought a van, maybe in like the old VW van, and started picking up kids in Ohio in this school. And their school literally was going around the state of Ohio doing outdoor education and learning. And all of that was happening in the van and in community spaces. I've always been fascinated by that book and that concept, that I thought, like, so think about this picture, right? what if instead of, and there are examples of this happening now. Science Leadership Academy in Philly's one. But what if students come into, say, a secondary space, starting in sixth grade, and learning is happening, right? You're a community ethnographer. They get a choice to say, do you want to do first trimester at the Colorado Art Museum or Museum of Contemporary Art? And because you seem like you're an artist, you've expressed that's an interest and passion of yours. We will make sure that you are going to get some experiences with working artists, that you're going to get a chance to work on your own art and present. And for the first trimester, that will be your learning experience at the art museum. You'll come into the school building maybe once or twice, but a lot of your time will be spent in art communities and in art spaces working on this. Or for a high school student who is thinking about being a marine biologist, right? And working at the local aquarium, right? Like we have to understand that not going back to normal means some very clear commitments and choices and thinking about where and when learning happen, anywhere, anytime, is what we have to design for and create for our students. One, because of COVID restrictions. Two, because, well, that other sort of 35 kids in a classroom in rows and taking tests really works so well for everybody, right? So I think it's whatever those community conversations look like, and I'm using community in a very broad sense, right? Because it can look different in multiple spaces, but I think the idea that you all talk about at CWI about community spaces and process and connection and relationships and stories, right? Think about folk who never maybe recognized locally in their families, owned a corner store for 25 years. Think about the stories they don't get to tell and the wisdom they can impart and the skills they can impart and the cultural knowledge, right? That they can impart with students. So I think you've got to we have to really think hard about, if we don't want to return to normal, then what does that really look like in some very creative and detailed ways? Because I have been accused of being like a big thinker and a visionary, but I can do details too. So I just want to say that, like, those examples exist out there. Big Picture Learning's one. I mentioned Science Leadership Academy. I'm on my Philly bent right now, Building 21 up in Philly. I think if you design 39 campus out in Cali. Those are schools and communities asking some very hard questions about who are we as a school and what are we going to commit to, particularly around issues of equity and how we do school.
So what, you didn't say this, but I think that at the end of the day, and it's easy for some of us to say, we're talking about taking a homegrown approach, and I'm going to give a shout out to an amazing colleague that I've had the pleasure to meet in the last month or so, Carlos Aponte at We Love Philly. There, just Google
another that. Philly call out. Okay, yes.
And it's very DIY and, you know, very right here and now. And I think it's exactly what you just described. It's you know, it's the way you talk about students at Prep in Denver, and an opportunity to connect with local folks. And yeah, you've got to have a structure going into it. You've got to have a program going into it, at least starting point, and then let's see what's possible.
Yeah, I mean, my daughter right now she's online. She is at Embark Education. So that school was started 2 years ago now. No, my daughter, 2 years. They're 2 years up and running. But they started two businesses and the school at the same time. And the concept behind it is it's connected to Pinwheel Coffee Shop and next door to it is Framework Bicycle Shop. And the learning hub or the school sort of sits behind those two businesses. So the idea was it's an independent school, no tuition charge because a portion of the proceeds from the businesses support tuition for the students at the school, right? She loves it. They are online. They are engaging. I hear up there laughing all the time. She's probably going to be embarrassed. I'm going to get yelled at later. My 13-year-old daughter is going to yell at me because I'm talking about her.
So you're the second parent / educator who told me they had a kid who was laughing. And,
yes.
And that was kind of an indicator of success.
Yeah, and laughing and connecting with her friends. She just taught us. She was really close to some of the 8th graders last year who moved on to other schools because it's only a middle school, 6th through 8th grade. She just came down. She was just happy because she got to connect with her friends.
Right.
The activities they're engaging them in are relevant to her. So like there are examples out there of what a joyful, rigorous learning experience can be for students. I think about Empower High School in Aurora, founded by Wisdom Amadou. It is a community-based, community-run school. He's been featured in a couple articles recently, but just a lot of blood, sweat, and tears he's putting into work and just committed to equity and a different learning experience for students, rooted in just love, right? Students get a $100 grant to pursue their passion projects, right? If school, when I was in high school, and I was in a blue ribbon high school, if they would have told me, back then, we'll give you $100 to use any way you want on something you want to learn about or get better at, right? No, that's a different question. Like I probably would have like, huh? What are you saying? Like, is there a trick to this? Is there like, are you lying to me? It's a setup.
But what a small investment,
right? $100. Like I'm stealing the idea, right? So that's going to be coming to prep as we found out coming around second semester. But there are places I've visited and been a part of, but that has just been just a practice to like where you're investing in kids as a way to just say like, we do care about you in your future. We do see you as more than just a number or a data point. We're going to invest in you. Right? It's something that's relevant to you that you want to learn about.
Well, Eric,
yes.
Eric Rowe, principal of Prep Academy in Denver. I just want to thank you so much for your time.
We talk a lot, brother.
we do, but this was different, and I want to thank you so much for making time in your day of managing Prep Academy, the 6th through 12th grade experience for students in Denver. And we'll talk soon. And on behalf of our Facebook and otherwise audience out there, thank you so much for your time. This
was fun. Hey, Sonnet. Okay. I'll see you later, Joe.
All right. Thank you very much. Take care.
Bye.